Hello. Good to see everybody. I'll be getting started here in just a minute, doing a little impromptu Q&A session this morning. All right. I'm going to let people kind of gather. There was no scheduling notice, so I'm assuming that we may have a couple of minutes before people get the notifications that I'm live and we get a little bigger audience in here to get started with. I'm not going to be doing birth charts today. I'm kind of saving my energy for the upcoming live streams. I'm having a few live streams Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday, the final days of the Kickstarter, where I'll be doing live birth charts. I thought today I would just come on and do some Q&A and take your questions about astrology. So I'll be getting started here momentarily. Hang with me for a minute here. All righty. But in the meantime, as we are getting started, tell me where you are all coming from, and I'm going to do a little roll call. I see Susie coming from Colorado, and let's see here. Val from Jacksonville, Florida. Good to see you there. Diana from, is that Alberta, Canada? Danielle from Indianapolis. Hello. Amazing. Jennifer from Michigan. It's good. Do you have Cash App for donate? So I do super thanks, but it never comes out of my account, so I'm not sure what the problem is. Actually, we really can't take anything but through the Kickstarter. So I'll ask you to use the Kickstarter link and donate that way. That's the official platform that the fundraising is taking place on, and anything outside of that really doesn't help us meet our goal for the Kickstarter. So if you could use that, that'd be great. I'm going to put the link in the chat in a minute. Hello from Texas. I'm in your Nightlight Astrology group and I love it. Oh, I'm glad to hear that. That's awesome. From Portugal, from Baghdad, from Ottawa, from Olympia, Brooklyn, from Detroit, Indiana, from the UK, year 2 student, awesome. From Sydney, from Santa Cruz, from Brazil, from Los Angeles, amazing. From New Hampshire. Excellent. Well, I'm very glad to be here this morning. This is a little impromptu live stream that I decided to do to help support the Kickstarter campaign. I will tell you more about how you can donate to the Kickstarter campaign in a little bit, but for now, the simple explanation is follow the link that is in the live stream comments section. If you're listening to this later, it'll be in the description of the video, tagged to the top of the comment section. You can also find the link at nightlightastrology.com. As of the time that I am recording this right now, let's do a little backer total count. We're trying to get to 1,937 backers. We have 1,111, which means we still need 826 backers by New Year's Eve. I think we can get there, but we are about 120 backers behind our pace from last year. So we really do need a huge showing of support today. See if we can't get closer to that final goal by New Year's Eve. If you enjoy the channel, please consider following that Kickstarter link and pitching in a few bucks. Every donation helps. And of course, we've got a bunch of really good gifts and amazing offers when you donate. So check out the variety of rewards that you can pick up, including the best deals on all of our classes you want to come study with us. From Decatur, from Guadalajara, from Sweden. Well, it is really good to be here with you, and I'm going to take your questions about astrology. Anything you'd like to know about me as a content creator, anything you'd like to know about astrology, feel free to put the question into the live stream chat and I will get after it. The one thing that I ask you not to do is ask me to interpret something specific in your natal chart, because unless I sit down and talk with you and look at the whole chart, I don't like to comment because there's too much context missing. I can give you some basic delineations. Like, here's a good one. Marie asks, Alan Ellenboss. I go by Adam. Most days. Everyone's been mistakenly calling me Alan since I was a little boy, so I'm used to it. But Venus and Leo in the 9th house kinds of careers. Well, if for one thing, we have to start with the fact that Venus and Leo in the 9th house may have nothing to do with a career, right? So it really does depend on why we're deciding, like, how have we gotten to the point where we've decided Venus has something to do with a career? But if we have, and we're looking at Venus in the 9th house in general, we might be looking at some overlap between the topics of education and Venus. For example, art and education, whether that's a student of music or a student of painting, a student of some other fine art. The arts and education often go together when Venus is in the 9th house. You may also find that Venus in the 9th house pertains to something that has nothing to do with work, like love abroad. I've seen many cases of people with Venus in the 9th house marrying someone from another part of the world. It's kind of interesting how that happens. Venus in the 9th house could also, I've seen people with Venus in the 9th house who do, primarily, they're maybe an attorney. The 9th house is the house of the law. But it might be that they are a divorce attorney, right? So they deal with Venus in the courts. So Venus and love in the courts. So there can be very creative ways in which Venus shows up in that 9th house. Another one might be that they're someone who studies something Venusian and spiritual, like women's spirituality or pagan forms of animate mysticism or something like that. So there's a lot of different ways Venus can show up. It's a good question. I like that. How much weight should we put on secondary progressions? This is a really good question from Leah. The way that I like to talk about any forecasting tool, right, is that a forecasting tool is just that. It's a tool, and it has specific uses. And what I would say is that some tools, you can always check to see what your tools are pointing toward or what your tools are saying. It's like the secondary progressions is really a form of speech. It's like, there's something that's talking. What is it saying and what weight does it have really is not a matter of what's in progressions inherently, as much as it is how a progression comes to bear on a very specific delineation. So it's context driven. Everything in astrology works that way, right? It's like, how much weight should you put on a major arcana card in tarot? Well, it depends on what position it's in and what the question is and what other cards are present. Do you see what I mean? So when you use tools in astrology, there's not like an abstract way in which tools are weighted against each other prior to their actual use in a reading. The way that we weigh their importance has to do with usually a collection of tools that we're using. Maybe we're using transits, perfections, zodiacal releasing, progressions. So we've got a bunch of tools at our disposal. Probably the tool that everyone uses most basically and probably gives the most weight to kind of by default are transits. If you add in secondary progressions, let's say someone's going through Pluto opposite their sun, and then at the same time, their progression is showing that they're in a full moon in the progressed lunar phase. Okay, so the full moon in the progressed lunar phase is giving you, it's like accenting and amplifying what the Pluto sun dynamic is saying. But there may be another situation where a person has a transit, you look to the secondary progressions, you really don't see anything. But then you look to zodiacal releasing or annual perfections, and the perfected house for the ascendant on the year is the 8th, or it's like there'll be some other tool that might align with what transits are initially opening up for you as the reader, and then have a way of augmenting or amplifying that delineation. So you don't know until you check through a variety of tools and often you'll find that all of the tools have something to say, and then it becomes a matter of really just not overcomplicating things and just sticking with the simplest way of saying something. And other times it's going to be the case that a secondary progression really helps you confirm, okay, I think I am seeing what I thought I was seeing through the transits or something like that. So I don't abstractly put any value on secondary progressions. It's something to check, and then does it speak alongside of something else we're using? And if that's the case, then I think it's important. But don't think about progressions as an abstract or objective truth. It's really important, because the more we think about astrology systematically and pseudoscientifically as this objective clock that's doling out our karma, like we're in the gears of some kind of celestial karmic machine that has, it's infallible timing, and it's all wrapped up in this, that way of starting to view astrology moves us farther away from the oracular spirit of astrology. And frankly, I think it's a lesser form of astrology when we get with that mindset. It doesn't lead to good things in astrology. Anyway, those are just my opinions. Okay. This is a great question. Can you explain how the Lord of the Year biannual perfection affects the native, particularly when the lot of the year is a malefic? Sure. Well, first of all, when the Lord of the Year biannual perfection, what we're talking about, for those who don't know what annual perfections are, is an ancient timing technique wherein we advance the chart usually through the ascendant as the most basic, but you can perfect from anywhere. You can perfect from any whole sign house. And every year of life, the whole sign house advances one in zodiacal order. So, right now, for example, at age 43, I'm in a 8th house perfection year. Okay, so that 8th house perfection year tells me that the ruler of the 8th house, which in my chart would be Jupiter. I have Sagittarius in the 8th. Jupiter becomes the perfected Lord of the Year. That's perfecting from the ascendant. So I'm moving around the wheel in zodiacal order 1 year at a time for every year of life from the ascendant. What I'm doing is I'm saying, what kind of information does this year of life give me relative to the delineation starting point of the ascendant, which is character, health, identity, dharma. So if I'm in the 8th house this year, there's going to be 8th house topics that become a big deal. So one of the things that I'm about to do is pay off my car. In the next year, I'll be able to pay off my car. I'm eliminating financial debt in an 8th house year. That's a very basic example of something that, God willing, I hope to do in 2025 at some point. How relieving it is when you can pay off a loan of some kind, a credit card or a car bill or something like that. So I'm like, okay, well, in the year ahead, I'll hopefully be able to pay off my car. It's an 8th house situation. Someone could die. And that's a very real thing that happens during 8th house perfection years. And how will that affect me, my identity? So there's 8th house topics that come to bear on my sense of identity, purpose, and maybe health or bodily things. So really, it's interesting. It's interesting to consider that. Now, the ruler of the year will be Jupiter. So the first starting point for understanding what that means is not to delineate Jupiter's transits for the year, although that can be part of it. It's to delineate Jupiter's natal position in my birth chart. Because what we're saying is it's the matrix of the 8th house and its ruler, which in my case would be Jupiter in Libra, who will have a lot of voicing in the year ahead. Let me give you an example. I entered an 8th house perfection year in July. Shortly after that, 8th house, right? It's the house of death. The ruler is Jupiter in the 6th house in my chart in Libra. My very close mentor and someone who gave me my start as a writer, my editor, my agent, one of the publishers of Reality Sandwich, his name was Ken Jordan. He died of COVID complications. Got COVID, and like a week later, he passed. That was not long into my 8th house perfection year, with the ruler of the 8th, Jupiter, in the 6th house, sickness. And also, Jupiter in that house speaks to um, some very powerful mentors. You have Jupiter in the 6th, you can have people that are very influential. I won't get into that. If you attended my 6th house talk, you'd have heard me say more about that. But anyhow, the simple point being that the condition of the ruler of the year was Jupiter in my 6th house conjoined Saturn in Libra. And so I had the death of a mentor from a complication of sickness. That happened almost instantly as the year progressed. A couple months later, another mentor of mine, although I wasn't close with him personally, but he had a huge impact on my life and my professional trajectory. And his name was Jeffrey Cornelius, and I brought him. He came to the United States, and he came and spoke at my school for a week in 2014, and it radically changed my life. Like, seriously shifted my entire practice of astrology. It set me down the path to studying Horary and then Hellenistic. Taught me all about the divinatory perspective that I now teach and is a core philosophy of my practice. Another mentor in my life also died. So 2 mentors. Jupiter, remember, representing teachers, gurus, like that. The ruler of the perfection year in the 8th house passed. So those are 2 examples halfway through my perfection year of 2 Jupiterian figures dying of sickness, complications from sickness. So you pay attention to the position of the ruler in the house that it's in and its natal karmic context, because the promise of the ruler of the house is a huge part of how you delineate what karma in the chart will be active each year. Secondarily, people place way too much emphasis on the transiting position of Jupiter, which is important as the perfected ruler of the year, but it's secondary to the natal karmic context, right? Perfections are not a transit, right? They're a symbolic technique of releasing the promise of the chart year by year. So secondarily, paying attention to the transits of Jupiter can be really significant. For example, the Jupiter-Saturn square. During a year where Jupiter is my perfected ruler, of the ascendant perfection, the Jupiter-Saturn squares are really significant for me this year, right? For a variety of reasons. But you can follow the transits. The shifting of sign will be a big deal next June, prior to the end of my 8th house year. And then what's really interesting is to note that when the perfection shifts, then there's a new planet in your chart that takes over and new transits to pay attention to throughout the year. But the ruler of the year is just going to play a role in how and when some of the natal context of that, in my case, 8th house and Jupiter in the 6th, as the core karma that's releasing in the year expresses itself. When it expresses itself can be tracked in some ways by the transits of the Lord of the year. But it's secondary to just reading the karmic context of the birth chart and the natal ruler. Okay, I hope that helps. It's a really good question. Can you speak on the midheaven and its influence on public persona? Sure. So the midheaven, this is a really important detail that I teach in my programs. And frankly, there's a lot of people who have confusion about this, and understandably, because of the difference of the role in the midheaven in ancient astrology compared to modern astrology. So in modern astrology, the midheaven is the degree that's used to establish the cusp of the 10th house. The cusp of the 10th house is going to be used to delineate the topic of career, because it's your house. Houses delineate topics, right? So the midheaven has this role that it plays in modern astrology in quadrant-based houses, basically, of delineating career. And the 10th house associated with public persona, public reputation, status or stature or rank or notoriety, things like that, right? Here's the problem, is that houses delineate topics, not degrees. So it's a big difference in ancient astrology. This is something Robert Schmidt taught me personally, that I kind of, the way he explained it's like, I'll never go back. I can't see it the same anymore. So what you think about when you're thinking about the midheaven in whole sign houses in ancient astrology is a critical degree. Think of it like a fixed star. If you know anything about fixed stars in ancient astrology, the ascendant, descendant, midheaven, IC are like very sensitive points, but they don't delineate topics. Okay, they have an interesting astronomical association symbolically with the topics of the angles. There is a kind of way in which there is a similar astronomical symbolism. For example, the ascendant is clearly associated with the first house because it establishes the first house, the descendant, the seventh. The rising and setting points are related with the rising and setting houses. But we don't look to those points to delineate the houses. We look to the houses, meaning the temples of the planets. We don't look to the ascendant degree. We look to, if Cancer is rising, then the house of the moon delineates the topics of dharma, health, identity, psychology, constitution, vitality. It's Cancer, not the ascendant degree, right? It's the ascendant degree demarcates which sign will delineate the first house topics. When it comes to the midheaven, because the midheaven is this highest point of latitude, it shares a kind of astronomical symbolism with the highest portion of the zodiac relative to the rising portion of the zodiacal circle. And so it bears some resemblance to things that are exalted or elevated or lifted up high, very visible for everyone to see, which is what the 10th house means on an astronomical or symbolic level, and which is where we get a variety of career and public persona kinds of topics from, right? Personas may be the right word, maybe not too. It just depends. It's not like there's something phony about your public presentation. So if people mean that by persona, it's not always accurate. Although, you know, sometimes people show up in the world with kind of phoniness. So, but it's not really, yeah, it's not really like a fake place. I wouldn't. So sometimes people think about that when they think about the word persona. Anyhow, so you think about the 10th house, you're thinking about the highest portion of the zodiacal circle, the portion of the temple that's highest on the circle relative to the rising portion of the circle. That's our 10th whole sign house. That has the power to delineate career, vocation, arta, like the work and reputation and status that we have in the world, that kind of thing. The midheaven as a degree at which planets reach their highest latitude bears some resemblance to that high point astronomically. So there can be some way in which the midheaven delineates things that are similar to the 10th house. But, and this is really important, that is only the case if planets are conjoined the midheaven or closely configured to it by degree through an aspect. Otherwise, a blank midheaven, just a degree of a midheaven just sitting somewhere, has nothing to say because it's a point. It's not a temple of the zodiac, which is where the power to delineate topics comes from, the intersection between a portion of the circle, the ruling planets. I got something stuck in my throat. Hold on. The rising portion of the circle has the power to delineate things for the native's health. The 10th portion of the circle is a zodiacal temple that belongs to a god, and thus the god has power to reign over the topic. That's how it works. A point has no god associated with it. A point is just a point. So the only way that a point becomes able to infuse a planet with power and hence contribute to something of its delineation is when a planet is conjoined to it or configured to it. And the reason for that is that it's a point. And so the point, because of its astronomical position, when a planet is conjoined to it, gives the planet like a brighter, shinier, louder presence in the life. And because it's visible and lifted up on high, it will bear some resemblance to the 10th house in meaning. But otherwise, it's pretty much devoid of meaning because the only meaning it has is relative to planets that are at it or configured to it by like a trine or a sextile or something like that. So the big thing with the midheaven is I highly recommend that you don't think about it at all in relation to anything related to career or public persona or personality or anything like that, unless a transiting planet is going over it, or a natal planet is conjoined to it or configured to it by degree. Otherwise, it's not going to play a big role in the chart until a transiting planet goes over it. Then you'll notice it then for sure. But midheaven is a sensitive degree that activates planets that are on it or configured to it. Otherwise, it does not play a role in delineating anything. And it's a very big difference that the more we understand it, the better we're going to get at using the midheaven, because mostly we think of it as having meaning when it's like a fixed star. Well, there's 100 fixed stars. Unless you have a planet on a fixed star, it's not going to say anything. So same thing with the midheaven and IC for the most part. So anyway, and now by transit, pay attention to it for sure, but otherwise. Okay. Let's see. Okay, these are great questions. Did the gods believe in God? And how do Christians reconcile practicing Hellenistic astrology? That's a fun question. I like that. Well, look, here's the thing is that in ancient astrology, like if you look, for example, at comparative texts from the earliest mystical schools that we know practiced astrology, or that astrology probably came from, they're not like us in the sense that, coming from a Christian background where they think of polytheism and monotheism as like contradictory opposites. They think of the gods all as manifestations of the one. So there's a way in which God is one and God is many. And so there's a way in which a family of people is all one thing, and yet they're a collection of individuals. And so divinity is looked at as a plurality and a singularity at the exact same time. It's that way in India. It's that way across most Asian, East Asian spiritual traditions, certainly in Hermeticism, Platonism, Stoicism. You go across the board, the one and the many are part and parcel of each other. So it's not that the gods believe in God, it's that the gods are God. And God is the gods, and goddess, obviously. So it's better to think about it that way. And the only thing that's necessary for Christians to reconcile with practicing Hellenistic astrology is that God is bigger than just their religious tradition. It's that simple. It's like Christianity is a fine, beautiful, mystical tradition with an avatar at the center in Jesus. Amazing. Practice that path. Just don't make the mistake of thinking that God is limited in God's expressions to the point that God has not shown up and does not show up in many different faith traditions, in many different avatars. And in that if Jesus is a son of God, then there are sons and daughters of God throughout our entire planet's religious history. And in my experience, the only Christians that astrology really doesn't work for are usually the ones that are going to have a pretty narrow way of thinking about divinity itself. And I don't mean any offense by that. That's just my honest answer. As someone who came from the Christian background, I can tell you that's exactly what I personally went through in my own kind of heart and mind opening process. It's just as simple as realizing that you don't have to take anything away from your faith or your practices, your liturgical tradition, your rituals, your community, your faith or your texts, your scriptures. Nothing has to be lost from your tradition. And at the same time, you can recognize that God is so big and so vast and so mysterious and so loving, and has so many different access points. There are different ways up the mountain, or we're all touching different parts of the same elephant blindfolded, or however you want to put it. And I think that, like a universal, ecumenical, open-minded Christian should have no problem with astrology. In fact, my first horary teacher and the man that married my wife and I was an Episcopal priest who studied astrology. Right. So Christianity also has a long history of being involved with astrology. There are birth charts and zodiac icons in cathedrals all over the world, in fact, from ancient times. Bishops, cardinals that practiced astrology, early church fathers that practiced astrology. So I also need to learn about the history to understand that the current evangelical and sort of like fanatical fundamentalism in the United States and its attitude toward astrology is not representative of the history of Christianity and astrology by and large. There's been a lot of inroads between Christianity and astrology at different times. And I mean, it's amazing how much denial there is about the very basic fact that one of our gospels has magi, who are literally astrologers, charting the birth of Jesus, someone completely outside of their faith tradition, through the appearance of a star as a great prophet, great teacher, great leader that's going to be born. So the inclusion of that is already universal in application. And so just read your own gospel, you know. Yeah, hope that helps. Of course, you can feel a little, there's a little built up resentment because I year round, we'll get people evangelizing on the channel that I have to delete because they're telling everyone they're going to hell and, stuff like that. So. Oh, let's see here. These are such great questions. How do you like perfecting from the luminary and sect? Do you think that's more accurate than perfecting from the ascendant? It's not about accuracy, right? That's an important distinction. It's a good question. It's not about accuracy. It's about intention. Like, why are you perfecting from one versus the other? Because they just give different information. They give different kind of information based on different starting points that have different delineations, so perfecting from the luminary in the sect is going to give you information about the life relative to the sun or moon, purpose, or let's say environment, two very basic ancient ways of describing the sun and moon universally. Purpose and environment give you something different than health and identity in the ascendant, right? So it's not that one's more accurate, it's that they're giving you different ways of thinking about and looking at experience in any given year. Hi there, I'm curious about 0 degrees, why it's important and how planets there influence the rest of the chart. They don't. There's nothing special or magical about 0 degrees at all. Just ignore that idea. We have too much magical thinking in astrology and a lack of very basic and fundamental skill. It's like, I guarantee you, in whatever chart you're looking at, if you see a planet at 0 degrees, there are probably 25 things more important than that. And you should spend almost zero time on that because it doesn't really mean anything. The fact that it's at 0 degrees alone, nada. Really, seriously, not important. Now, depending on context, there can be a lot of very specific meanings. For example, in a horary chart, a planet at 0 degrees could represent something that has just recently changed. And so in the context of the horary, that could be a significant detail. 0 degrees, when a planet is at 0 degrees, in a transit, it might be initiating something new because it's just entered a new whole sign house, and it has the function at that early 0-1 degrees of kind of initiating a new cycle of activity or new topics in the life. So 0 degrees can clue us into something or give us a detail about something, but by and large, 0 degrees doesn't really mean anything. It's not significant. Like, if I had a nickel for every time people ask me that question, right, about 0 degrees or 29 degrees, the anaretic degree, it's like, yeah, do you know your dignities? Do you know how to read your dignities? Because if you don't know how to do that, doesn't matter. Like, all of these completely peripheral kinds of considerations that are like, it's like we're getting so granular. We're missing such big, obvious stuff compared to things at 0 degrees. So that what I would just generally say to everybody is spend more time getting to know the most basic standout features of charts and care less about the little nuanced, detailed kinds of things that truly most of the time don't mean anything. Okay. Kirian says, what is your take on getting lost in shadow work from your perspective of depth psychology, especially for someone with lots of planets in dark houses? Well, there's no such thing as dark houses, first of all. So all the houses are divine, and they all have very specific, deep, sacred meanings. So I would, first of all, suggest just not thinking about planets and signs and houses as inherently dark. There may be difficulties with respect to the 12th house or the 6th house or the 8th house, for example. But if you have a really like a fundamental way of thinking about them as shadow and dark, you're missing the, think of every house as like a temple, and that temple is constantly being cleaned and kept beautiful. There's light streaming in through all of these beautiful windows. There's a fire in the middle, and there are monks that come from the stars that live in these temples, and they're cleaning them constantly. And it's beautiful on the inside of every one of them. Okay, so one of them is called the 12th house, one of them is called the 8th house, and one of them is called the 6th. And in those houses, there are maybe some heavier things going on, right? But you have to understand that there are star monks sweeping that temple, and it's a holy place with light streaming into it, right? So you can't get lost if you have that perspective, I think, and it's a perspective that carries over into how we understand what shadows are. And that can help us at the very least to stay conscious while we're going through shadowy times or places or circumstances. Remember the light. How do we keep the light in our hearts? How do we bring it with us into shadowy places and circumstances is more the question than, feeling like I'm going to have a tendency to get lost because there's planets in dark houses. So there's no dark houses, right? There's only an inability that we have to hold the light, and that we're growing, we're learning to do. All of us are. And it's hard. It's not easy to do, but that's the work. So you don't get lost in shadow work by just continuing to do the work. And also knowing that like at times you are going to get lost. It's like Amazing Grace. I once was lost, but now I'm found. That's part of it. You're not going to get lost forever. God won't let you get lost forever. The gods, the goddesses won't let you get lost forever. If you get temporarily lost, there may be some lessons there in how to be resilient and how to develop practices and how to stay grounded and how to carry the light with you, or even on how to deal or work through times when you feel lost, knowing that the light will return, or keeping the faith. So, yeah. But what I would say is that one of the things that is a real, if there's a tendency to get lost in like endless personal growth work, I'm doing the work, I'm working, I'm growing, I'm healing, that kind of thing can get, it's sort of like, guess what? There's an unending amount of karma in this world. It's like, explain it like this, like karma is said to be anadi in Sanskrit in the Vedic literature, which means without beginning. And so in the material energy, there's no getting to the bottom of it. There's no the material energy is by its very nature entangling, and anything that comes into being in the material energy passes out of being, right? It comes in and it goes out. It's impermanent, it's fluctuating, it's changing. And because we're, partially divine in nature and partially material in nature, we have a kind of schism within ourselves about our existence, in our own nature. It's like, oh, I'm immortal, but I'm mortal. I'm eternal, but I'm time bound. I'm spiritual, but I'm material, right? So that division, we try to solve it by getting to the bottom of the imperfect, fluctuating material energy, which, always on a certain level, its job is to drag us down, because the sweetness of life comes from the inevitability of death. That's like part of the beauty of the material energy, is that it provides us with a sweetness that's rooted in bitterness, And so we try to solve that by doing endless amounts of spiritual work. But from this standpoint, that work it's like trying to peel back the layers of an onion and get down to the core, and then you'll be healed and you'll be good. And there's no end to the layers of the onion in the karmic world, because it's an endless cycling of material energy with no beginning. And so you can't get back to the origins or the roots of it. You can't get back to some place where it went wrong and make it right. And so one of the best ways to get off from the kind of self-flagellating, quest to heal ourselves, which can, for some people, become so consuming and so obsessive that it becomes like, pathological and maybe like even sort of narcissistic. I'm healing, I'm growing, I'm healing, I'm growing. Oh my God, I'm getting rid of the trauma. Oh my God, I'm getting rid of this, I'm getting rid of that, I'm purifying, I'm purging, and blah, 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 like that. And there's some level of healing work that we're always doing because of the tension between the spiritual and the material that's a part of us. But one of the best ways of getting out of that loop of thinking that I can get to the bottom of it and maybe getting lost in shadow work is to be spontaneous and creative. Rather than trying to fix something that we don't feel is working, try to create something. So a natural antidote to thinking that we're broken and we need to be fixed is to create something. Like create love, create art, create beauty, create music, create sound, create movement, be a creative being who sees the material energy as a kind of medium through which to express and connect to love, to connect to divinity, rather than feeling like there's something wrong that has to be fixed. See, a lot of healing work is actually rooted in an inability to accept ourselves and to accept life and reality just as it is. We think we're going on doing this noble healing work, and actually we're just stuck, So somewhere between doing meaningful healing work and having fun and being creative, that's the middle path, right? Where we there's work to be done. It's good to have a therapist, good to have people you can talk to, good to have tools that allow you to be reflective and to grow and evolve and burn off bad karma. Sure. And then also stop thinking about it all the time, right? There's no getting to the bottom of it. So one of the ways we turn away from that path if we're getting lost in it is to be creative, to accept life, to embrace it, to love it, and to stop thinking we need to fix something. So yeah, it's like a tension we hold between the two. This is how I've been taught anyhow. How to feel about remediation? Well, this is a fun question. For example, do you feel as though paying off your car could take the place of a less favorable 8th house signification for you next year? Maybe, but I don't think about it that way. I'm not, I sometimes say in my classes, like, don't do deals with the devil. And I mean that totally metaphorically, not literally. I have such little awareness in this grand scheme of things, such little consciousness. So why am I going to pretend that I know how everything works? Or why am I going to pretend that I know if I do this, I'll avoid that? Or if I don't do this, I'll get this? Or, no. What I know is that the more that I try to play with and manipulate karma, the worse off I'm going to be. As opposed to just being humble, acting with the best of intentions, with a clear, clean heart, the best that I can, and open arms. I don't know what I need. I don't exactly know where I'm going. I don't exactly know why I do the things I do. Please guide me, teach me, give me feedback through my choices and consequences of actions that allow me to become a better person. And I'll just trust that process is at work and not try to fiddle with things otherwise. Because when I was a kid, my dad would say, when I would get like really rowdy and wild, he would be like, you're cruising for a bruising. Like, you're going to run into a wall. You're going to hurt yourself. You're cruising for a bruising. And that's how I think we are when we try to fiddle around too much with our karma. It's like, it's not that you have no choice, no agency, no involvement, but don't pretend. This is me talking to myself. I'm not going to pretend like I know what's going on and that I know what could replace this or that. I don't live parallel lives or have access to parallel tracks of outcomes. So how could I compare or know anyway, So yeah, that's just my point of view. Okay. From your perspective, regardless of the client's question, what will you pay attention to in the chart? In other words, what is indispensable in your chart analysis? Nothing, because I don't do that. I have to reject the premise of your question because it's never regardless of the client's question. The client's question is the presence of a real person that makes a real language powerful and useful, right? So I truly mean that when I say that, like, I don't start there. I never start there. When a person comes in and they tell me what's up, what they want to talk about, why they're there, then I'll have a starting point. I'll have things to pay attention to, because the oracle itself will start opening things. That's how it works. I don't do things. The oracle does things, and I just pay attention. Now, to be fair, because I don't mean to be like, yeah, like, I understand what you're asking, like, practically speaking. And so, like, one of the things that, you're paying attention to dignities, you're paying attention to angularity. So there's a lot of different things that ancient astrologers said that gave planets voicing. And so voicing is a key thing that I look for. What is vocal here? What's speaking loudly? That's usually through angularity and essential and accidental dignity conditions. So obviously, set considerations, or where are the luminaries or the ascendant ruler, there's a variety of things that you learn to pay attention to, because they tend to speak loudly. But among them, there's no pecking order. It really is the context of the chart, the day, the question, the querent's intentions, what they're looking for. And that requires some exchange. And then things open up. And quite frequently, it's not anything on that list I gave that speaks first. Although, it's not surprising when they're asking about career and they've got a transiting planet in their 10th house or something. It's like, the angularity speaking or something like that. But yeah. Such good questions. Just pledged $100 to the Kickstarter. Thank you for being a great teacher, facilitating the foundations and beginning of my astrology career. Nightlight 28. Oh, good. Thank you. That's great. I'm going to take a moment to pause. And you know what? I don't know if my normal mic is on. Let me see. No, it isn't here. That's a good call. Sorry about that. Is my mic better now? Can you hear it better? I think something. Probably I think my webcam's mic is on. That's a pretty crappy mic, so I apologize for that. So let me tell you about the Kickstarter campaign. Before we go on with more Q&A here, this has been a really fun, lively session so far. We need 1,937 backers by New Year's Eve. As of right now, we are at 1,121, which means we need 816 more backers by New Year's Eve. Well, 815, just had one come in right there. So if you like this channel, if you appreciate these Q&As, if you learn something, even if I'm an astrologer who has views that are different from your own, if these views help you clarify your own, I think that's good too. I have lots of astrologers in my life who I've followed, who have meant something to me, whose views help me shape my own. And I really appreciate the way they articulate things, even if I arrive at a slightly different place. We need grit to grind up against as we shape ourselves astrologically. So even if this channel is grit for you, then consider pitching in and donating to support this work. Here's the link in the comments section. You can go over to nightlightastrology.com and click on the 2025 Kickstarter link. It'll take you over there. Like I said, we need about 816 more backers with just a few more days left. We have about 3 more days to go before we are at the deadline. So let's see if we can do it. Thank you to everybody who's already donated as well. And come study with us. Come pick up a class pass. All right. Let's see here. What is the order of importance, house versus sign, when determining the strength of a planetary placement? There's not a pecking order, okay? I so badly want people to think about astrology as a living language, So think about how flexible language is. Is there an order of importance with verb and noun? And, is there an order of importance? When you start talking to someone, right, the language conveys what's important. I know that sounds so simple, and I don't mean to sound like such a dick, but it's like, stop thinking about it this way. Everybody needs to do this. It's not about what is ordered in importance, you'll know what's important. Of course, you consider the house position, you consider the sign position, you consider the dignity, you consider aspects, you consider the planet, you consider the topics. But all of those things are just features of a language that is allowing you to hear something talk to you. And so any and all features of the language can be used more or less with more or less importance and gravitas depending on the context. So one of the things I drive home in all of my classes, it's like something I reiterate over and over and over again, is we're learning all of these different facets of the language, but then there's no substitute for seeing live readings with real people and seeing how different facets of the language are utilized for voicing. I just sneeze. So when you ask, like, what's more important, house versus sign, when determining the strength of a planetary placement, don't think about planetary strength. Okay, planetary strength is an abstract, weird, hierarchical way of thinking about gods and goddesses that are trying to talk, right? Like, we're trying to place them in this hierarchical sense of importance and meaning and strength and weight. Eliminate all of that from your thinking. It's not how astrology works. And unfortunately, as the tradition went on, this kind of pseudoscientific thinking sort of infiltrated astrology, and it really doesn't help us to do good astrology, which has to do with utilizing all facets of symbolism within the craft language to hear the voice of the oracle relative to someone that's there with this very specific thing to talk about. You'll know what's important if you have an understanding of all the facets of the language, and you listen and watch and wait for the context to show you which facet or element of the language to call upon in order to delineate something. That intuitive application of craft is always more beneficial than an abstract and highly unimportant set of pseudo objective rules. Oh, it just drives me nuts. Okay, anyway. The story of the nativity is deeply astrological. Lots of cool lectures on YouTube about it. Yeah, there's some really good stuff there about the Christ story. Yeah. Joshua says, I was a Greek Orthodox Christian priest. I left it for astrology. My love for the church remains, but what a marvelous thing. That's lovely. Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. I'm really enjoying the Soul's Code right now. I'm wondering if you have any good Acorn stories from when you were a child, moments that prepared you to be an astrologer. Yeah. So there was a picture in our church of the Magi following the star. And when I was a little kid, I used to be, my attention was drawn to it over and over again, because I was just like, these people from the East, like from a far off land, are following a star because they know something about stars. These are astrologers. Like, I knew that as a little kid, and I thought it was fascinating. So I remember I can see right where the picture was hanging in the hallway outside, like the narthex area of the church, and I can see it in my mind's eye. And I remember, just being fascinated by it and being like, there's something more. There's something, because, I was a kid who liked Lord of the Rings. I liked wizards, So I was pretending like I was a wizard in my backyard with my friends, big Lord of the Rings fan, The Hobbit, Star Wars. And those traditions tapped into elemental magic, deep, universal, spiritual, like mystical currents, and things like wizards and the Force in Star Wars. And I saw that picture, for me, was always emblematic of the fact that there was something bigger than what was happening inside the walls of the church, which for me as a little boy felt at times very boring. So there's the Acorn. I think it's also interesting that my entry point into this was, South American form of shamanism with, indigenous curanderos, because when I was growing up, my father's one of his best friends was Native American, from the Blackfoot tribe. I think that's how you say it. And my dad and this gentleman who was a member of our church and a member of this tribe built
teepees together. He taught him how to build teepees, and they built teepee. They cut the poles and stripped the poles, and they got, I think it was like cordura, this kind of fabric, and they built teepees for state parks where there would be like that were set up in certain campsites. They built them for state parks, and then my dad and this gentleman, his name was Randy, they were the educators for the school district, and we would take a bus out to Randy's property, and he had a teepee on his property, a big, huge one, and we would listen to Native American folklore and cook traditional food to learn about Native American people. And my dad would take me out at night, many nights when I was a kid, and we would spend the night in the teepee, the two of us. So I had this connection to indigenous, like natural kind of ancient wisdom that was kind of happening for me outside of the church, but it was also like not totally disconnected from the church. There would be gatherings of people from the church where we'd sometimes go over in the teepee and gather together, and like maybe I remember roasting apples and reading Native American folklore. And my dad was a pretty universal guy, and he and Randy would talk about the intersection between faith traditions. So it's not surprising on the level of the Acorn theory that my departure from Christianity would happen through an indigenous healer from South America, in a small hut in the jungle, right? And that would be a bridge for me outside of the Christian faith. It would open up things like yoga and astrology and so many other things. But it would always I would always sort of keep some elements of my Christian faith in me, So I see that as all a part of the Acorn. And if you haven't read that book, we're talking about a book by James Hillman called The Soul's Code, which talks about this Acorn theory, which is, most people have heard of it, but it's a really beautiful book about fate and destiny. All right, let's see here. Why is it the caption subtitles are always off on these live broadcasts? I don't know. I have no idea. I don't. Maybe there's a setting I need to change or something like that. I apologize if that's the case. I use a Streamyard platform, and it maybe has something to do with Streamyard. Let's see. Adam, why doesn't West astrology seem to consider long-term influences like the Dasha system? Well, we do. We have in Hellenistic astrology, we have something called zodiacal releasing periods, which are basically the Western mirror version of the Dasha system. So we definitely do. But modern astrology is not, not as caught up yet on some of the ancient timing techniques, which have only been rediscovered and understood and used for, a few decades since the texts were just recently translated back into English for the first time in a long time. This isn't astrology related, but what does it mean when you dream of someone? That's a good question. Well, what comes to my mind is what I can imagine, like what my Jungian therapist would say. I've been working with a Jungian therapist for many years now. Something I highly recommend if you work with people is that you see someone yourself, So I think he would say that it depends on who it is. It doesn't necessarily mean anything that it is that dreaming of someone comes up. Sometimes you dream of people you've never met before. Sometimes you dream of people that you've met, but it's not really them. It's part of you. Or sometimes you dream of someone else and it's an actual visitation from your dead grandpa or, whatever. So I think that the meaning is not generic. It's like, it's similar to like, that like oh my God, an otter appeared in my dream. What do? Don't do anything. Don't rush off to the Ted Andrews Animal Speaks book and look up what otters mean. That is the last thing that we should do. Instead, you should think about the otter and maybe write it a note and place it on your bedside stand before you go to bed the next night. Talk to it. Consider it something that was alive and visiting you rather than an abstract meaning to be decoded. You see what I mean? Same thing with the problem we have with astrology, how much weight or importance or order or, should I put on this or that symbol? Like, they're living. Talk to them. Every facet of the language is like a living thing. And so it's about learning to communicate. And so when something shows up in a dream, speak to it, talk to it, ask it why it's there in a journal, put it down on the bed, and then just wait. Maybe it'll answer. Maybe it will never answer. But we should treat things like they're alive. That's the starting point. And I know my Jungian therapist would talk about it that way too. It depends on who it is. And then rather than interpreting it, try to talk to it. Okay. Sarah D, how can you overcome or work with challenging placements in your chart? Thank you. Good question. Don't think about them as things in your chart. Think about them as things in you, because a chart is just a mirror. It's just an oracular divinatory mirror that speaks. A chart is something you use to speak to the divine about yourself. So the problems, if there are problems or challenges, exist in you, not in a chart. So start there, because it's really important, because otherwise you're going to start thinking about what to do based on a whole series of objectifying mechanics that have to do with chart placements and not your actual soul. So, like, here's a simple remedy. And I heard this from a Vedic astrologer in India. I'll never forget it. Well, he said, in India, we have so much remediation, gemstones, Ayurvedic prescriptions, and it's all beautiful tradition of remediation. Here's the simplest remediation: love, compassion, kindness, charity, patience, spiritual practice, prayer, thoughtfulness, taking care of your body, being good to the people that you are somehow responsible for, if it's your kids or if it's your dog. Tend the living things around you, your plants, with care and love. Tend yourself with care and love. That will overcome all bad karma. That was what he said. I was like, thank you, sir. So basic, but we forget it because we start messing around with objectifications and charts. You're not a chart. You're a soul. So what can you do in the most basic way to overcome the problems? Usually the prescriptions are super simple. It's like, if I struggle with anger, then don't look at the chart. Look at yourself and look at the anger, and how do you become more peaceful, more patient, more compassionate? How do you forgive yourself if you're having a hard time with some facet of yourself that is hard to change? Maybe the answer for now is like, I try as I may, I fail, so I have to forgive myself. Maybe that's what I have to work on. But the bottom line is that overcoming challenging placements in your chart, what we really mean when we say that is we're overcoming difficult aspects of ourself and our own karma. And there's some of that there's nothing we can do about it because it's destined or it's fated. It's something we just have to go through. So we pray for acceptance and serenity and peace. And we pray that any kind of insight we may gain from difficult patterns would come so that we can be free. Moksha, right? So we can have some freedom from the darkness that persists. We just pray for that. Ask for this acceptance. Ask for the strength to go through what we have to go through. And then on the other hand, to whatever extent we can affect change by developing virtue, becoming more conscious, we do the best we can. And then we leave the rest out of it. Don't think about the chart. You can use the chart to time out transits and use insight and reflection from the chart to help you grow. But the answer is not in the chart, right? The chart is just there to aid in a kind of in a reflective way. It's like the chart is like filled with angelic heavenly counselors that are there to talk to. They're not going to solve your problems for you, and they are not your problems as well. Their placements are not your problem, right? So it's about using a conversation with them to aid in the process that should be very basic and intuitive for all of us. How do I accept hard things? How do I become a more illuminated soul? How do I become compassionate? How do I forgive? stuff like that. I hope that helps. I don't mean to make it sound trite, but it really is simpler than we make it with charts. Yeah, the sound is better now. Okay, good. Yeah. Is there an area of traditional astrology you think deserves more exploration, given that our understanding of Hellenistic only really started with Project Hindsight? Yes, I do. I think that there are so many esoteric and mystical doctrines that are baked into the framework of early Hellenistic astrology that we're not taking the time to look at, because there is there's an academic, there's like this, how do I want to say it? There's like an academic vibe that permeates traditional astrology. And we need more of a spiritual vibe to constellate around ancient and traditional astrology. Not that academics are bad or that they necessarily are like the spirituality and academia cannot work together. Of course they can. But when we're coming from an academic standpoint, what we're thinking of is we're thinking of ourselves as scholars in a kind of objective empirical mode. So I report on only what the text says. I report on only things that are explicit within the text. I report on techniques, not the underlying philosophies or spiritual views of reality or the universe or God that come with them, that were a part of where they came from. We don't comment on that, so the problem with ancient astrology, from my perspective, that's a huge part of why I teach the way I teach, is that we're not thinking about the philosophical, mystical, and spiritual roots behind the techniques, not nearly enough. We're only reporting as academically and objectively as possible, like journalists who are just telling you what techniques were used. But if we don't talk about why they were used, how they were used, and what beliefs and spiritual views and experiences of reality itself were imbued within them, we're not doing anything. That's just my opinion, but that is the problem, in my opinion, with a lot of ancient astrology. It's like, here are these interesting historical techniques, but no one's talking about the why, where they come from, or what kind of spiritual path they entail, which are also in the text, but also they require a little bit more of looking into what is implicit, not explicit, within the text and the tradition. And that work, to me, is that's my bread and butter. That's what I love. I don't care if it's a risk to take. I don't care, because I don't give a damn about academic, clout. I've done my graduate degrees. I went through the process of defending theses and writing papers, and it's like, I see academia as a valuable, beautiful thing that has contributed to the dissemination of Hellenistic astrology in a very powerful and valid and good way. And I also would say that, we don't talk at all about how do you care for the soul with Hellenistic astrology? How do you utilize Hellenistic astrology in a way that is psychologically encouraging and supportive? What are the spiritual ramifications of these techniques? Where did they ever come from in the first place? So that's what I think needs more. And there's a lot more that ancient astrologers themselves said is imbued in these texts that is not explicit, that you have to, there are like riddles embedded in these texts. There are secret doctrines and teachings embedded in them that you have to study in order to see them come out. We're not doing enough of that because too many people think it's risky. And they're worried about not appearing like, well, I put forth a theory about something and then I look like an idiot if it's wrong. Well, come on, live a little, Don't be so worried about being wrong. Be more excited about discovery. It's okay to get things wrong. You could always just tell people, like, I'm thinking about this or that idea. I'm reading the text in this way and considering these thoughts. Who knows if this is what they were originally doing or not, but let's think about it. I wish there was more of that with Hellenistic astrology. There needs to be. Okay. I like Monique's quote here. Don't be a square. Donate $1 to the Kickstarter and help keep this free. Thank you. Yeah, right now we're at 1,126 backers with just 3 days left to go. So we need, here's what we need. 1,937 minus 1,126. We need 811 more backers. So if you have not yet donated to the Kickstarter campaign and you appreciate these lively conversations, then here's the link in the comments section. You can find it in the chat section. Go to nightlightastrology.com. You can find the link there as well. Just signed up for year 3. Can't recommend Nightlight enough. Yeah, year 3 is an awesome course. We study Hellenistic astrology and archetypal psychology and how to bring the two together. That is the focus of our 3rd year through lectures in archetypal psychology and counseling with Hellenistic astrology. And then we also have a ton of live clients that come into that class so that we can look at how we actually apply Hellenistic techniques within a thoughtful counseling context. Okay. Ear Hustler says, in studying astrology, I'm using biographies, autobiographies against people's charts to see how they play out. What say you about this method of study? I think that's great. Yeah, I think you have to, just be careful that you don't get into speculation, gossip, and judgment about other people's fate, about their destiny, about their life. But I mean, yeah, I've used Stephen King's biography and his chart to study theories and techniques. I do it all the time with people who have publicly available birth information that have a very vivid life story that's very publicly known. Abraham Lincoln I've used before, so you can do that and have fun with it for sure. Just remember to sort of take your sandals off. You're on holy ground when you're looking at someone else's chart. As long as you do that, I think you're good. YouTube doesn't offer live captioning. Their captioning process is automated, done after the live stream ends. Okay, thank you. Just wanted to say, Cane Corsos are one of the best, absolute greatest breeds of dogs. Enjoy. R.I.P. Mia, my blue Cane Corso. Oh, well, I'm really glad to hear that. We're super excited to get the puppy. Is going to be born in like late February, and then we'll get it probably like late April or early May. Yeah, super excited. Use image as a guide to your associations. Yeah, I like that. What advice do you have for someone struggling to hear their own guidance intuition when trying to delineate a chart? The chart speaks, but what if you're blocked from hearing it? Yeah, that's a good question. I did not take a shower before I got here. I just had breakfast and was poking around, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to go do a live stream, and I popped a hat on. Okay, let's see. What advice do you have for someone struggling to hear their own guidance intuition when it comes to delineating a chart? Building that confidence and being able to develop that, archetypal eye/ear connection with the oracle takes time. It's not that you're blocked from hearing it. Don't conceptualize it that way. I really wouldn't. It's like, stay curious about why things happen rather than putting a label on it. I struggle to delineate charts. I struggle to hear that voice of the oracle. Don't jump to the conclusion that you're blocked, right? Because then you have to get unblocked, and like that sounds like a not so fun adventure. So stay curious. I wonder why I can't hear. I wonder how to hear. I wonder how to access my intuition. Stay in the question and the curiosity with the problem rather than, letting the frustration overcome you and then putting a label on what's happening. It's easy to put a label on something that's happening because we're frustrated. It actually creates a bigger problem for us than if we just stay curious and stick with something. Like, I honestly, I'll think about this, like in the gym, there was an exercise that I was doing. It was a type of row that I had never done before. And I was really feeling like 3-4 weeks in a row, like I just was having a hard time feeling the engagement with my muscle, like the mind-muscle connection. And I just think about the moment where, it's like frustration was mounting every week. And I get to this exercise and I was just like, I can't get the form. I'm not making the connection. Anyway, and then finally it clicked. And that's how most things happen. What was the lyric to that song? How did that go? What was the name of that movie? Let it go. About 10 minutes later, all of a sudden, boom, oh, it's there. All I would say, in other words, is just stay curious about where you're at, and don't let your frustration get greater than your curiosity. And then, in time, if you keep with it, keep reading charts, keep listening, keep asking the question, how do I listen? How do I hear? And see some live readings. Like, one great reason that one way that people really, in my classes, I think I see people take a really big leap when it comes to developing their own intuition by seeing someone else do it. So, come join us for some of our the year 3 class, Leah. You would love that class. And you can see intuition in action with the craft language. When you see that happening, it often just gets things unstuck in your head, that like little assumptions that we have, or little ways that we think we ought to be doing something, and we see, oh, I don't have to do that. And then all of a sudden you're free, and it's the freedom. One thing that my guitar teacher says quite a bit is, he says, when you're sitting down to play, like we were just having a Christmas gathering, and several family members brought their guitars, and we were all jamming. And, he said, he'll tell me things like, sometimes just let yourself play by ear. The shapes of the various scales, and you have a familiarity with them, but sometimes just don't pay attention to them. Just let your ear sort of lead you. And then, you can use the scales and and stuff like that, but like, let yourself explore, and you're going to make mistakes, but then see how a mistake in a note might lead you to the next note. He's teaching me about improv, right? And I have a way of getting stuck when it comes to improv on my guitar because of staying in certain shapes and structures. So, I was reflecting on this after Christmas on the way home in the car with my wife. I was like, gosh, when I was playing tonight, I was really thinking about my guitar teacher, and I was not paying attention to my scales, and I was playing a lot better. And so anyway, I think that it's also like, you need enough time and repetition to allow exploration to start happening naturally. It's just like, there's no way to get there other than time as well. So I don't know. I hope any of that's encouraging, Leah, but check out the 3rd year course. 2nd year student here just made a small pledge to the Kickstarter. My well wishes and gratitude are massive. Adam and staff, I adore you, and thank you from my heart for all you do. Well, thank you, Nina. We really appreciate you too, and I really appreciate the donation. I'm watching your masterclass on the nodes. It's a revelation. I far prefer the Hellenistic Ellenboss interpretation. And I think it's disrupting a story that I've long told about myself. Yay, that's it. We have these stories with the nodes of the moon, man. And once you learn how ancient astrologers thought about them, it's very liberating. I love that masterclass. Is one of my favorites. So I'm glad you're enjoying that. Imogene, life is a lesson, not a sentence. I love that. That's great. All righty. Okay. Do you think pain has some cleansing effect when it comes to karma? I'm not sure where I get this from. I'm not sure I understand this the right way. Yeah. So I take a lot of the ways that I think about things really came from how James Hillman has taught me how to think about things in his work, his whole body of work. I can almost hear how he would answer this question. I don't know, but I feel pretty confident he would say something like this. Okay, so see if it resonates. Do you have an experience? Have you ever had an experience of your life of something painful that was cleansing, healing, and instructive? I'd say 99% of us listening can probably say yes. Okay. Have you ever had an experience in your life of pain that felt pointless? There was no sense of it meaning anything. There was more of a sense of the arbitrariness of pain. There was a sense of pain being something random. And maybe it even made you existential. Like, what the hell was the purpose of that? Is there any purpose? It asks the bigger question. Have you ever lived with a daily experience of there being meaning? Have you ever lived with a daily experience of there being randomness, chaos, and a lack of meaning? The answer is yes to all of them. And that is because reality is all inclusive. There's nothing that you can't, anything you imagine is real. It says something that James Hillman would say. So does pain have some cleansing effect? Yeah, many people have described pain as having a cleansing effect. Many of us listening to this right now have experienced pain as cleansing. And many of us would also describe pain as pointless, suffering as without some greater narrative arc or purpose, some trauma as cruel and random. And it's very tempting for us to want to take the cruel, random, arbitrary, meaningless dimensions of suffering and to, kind of like twist them like a pretzel yoga move into something beautiful, meaningful. No. It's not meaningful. It's not meaningless. It's not arbitrary. It's not random. It's not chaotic. There's no existential void. It's all suffused with light and meaning and purpose. So all of the mystical traditions I've studied actually don't say that. I think it's a kind of paranoid, impatient, like modern take to insist that everything is meaningful. No, we live in a reality where some pain is very cleansing and very healing, and we can see the purpose behind it. And some feels arbitrary, random, and chaotic. And the fact that both exist is a tension that we have to learn how to hold in order to really feel what sacredness is. So what is sacred, right? Is you step into something sacred when you sort of are able to hold this paradoxical tension between two things that are both real and true at the exact same time. Some pain has no larger meaning or purpose, and explaining it that way is insulting. It's insulting to reality itself. It's what to speak of whoever may have been a victim of something. But then it's also the case that there often is meaning, and there is cleansing, and there is healing and purpose behind pain. We have to be why are we so impatient? Why are we so unimaginative that both cannot be real parts of life, that when held together, that's what makes life so sacred and holy, so deeply mysterious and lovable. It's because it's both, So not surprising that people end up feeling really torn inside when someone says all pain, all karma is good for you. It's this lesson that you need and blah, 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 because there's something in us that goes, no, that's offensive to the way I feel and the in my heart, which is that there are things that happen that feel cruel and empty and hollow and meaningless and random, and they don't feel like they fit the order. So that other, that outsider, that fallenness, that void, those are real dimensions of reality itself that go along with and provide us part of the texture of the meaning. They exist together. It's like yin and yang. You can't, we're so impatient when it comes to opposites. Okay. God, I miss my dog's big, huge holes in my heart. Aw. You gonna get another one? You gotta take some time sometimes. When does your next beginner module start? Well, the beginner course itself for absolute beginners is pre-recorded content. It's about 10 hours. And it doesn't start. It's just something you purchase and you can listen to on your own time. And there's a bunch of bonus material with it. That's if you're absolute zero. If you're kind of like, I've never learned anything at all, like starting from scratch, that would be the one to take. But year one begins in June and November. So if you pick it up through the Kickstarter, you can start with us year one in June of 25 or the fall. Look for the snake, Erica says. Yeah, this is something we talk about at length in my third year program, which Erica is the TA for, one of the two TAs. We talk about, there's an essay that we read that has to do with looking for looking for the snake, which is the living presence, the spirit that's speaking in a reading. And we talk a lot about that. Anyway, yeah. No, it wasn't bent over rose. It was something called pocket rose. And to put it simply, it's like you're bent over on like with one hand on the bench, and you're coming up like this, and you're sort of raising a dumbbell and kind of almost putting it in your back pocket. You're engaging your lat, but for the love of God, I was just having a really hard time not lifting from my shoulder, not engaging other muscles. It was just like a weird, it's like a yoga pose where you're just like, I can't do it. And then I figured it out. So they say, meditate, clear the moment, and allow the moment to show up. I love that. Leah says, I'm in year 3, just way behind due to health issues. Okay, well, you feel better. It's like at certain times, my personal trainer that I work with, he says, if I'm struggling with something, he'll be like, get your mind right and then get back to the gym. So there's a time where I was like just really going through some personal stuff, and he was like, just take a day, get yourself straight, and then get back to the gym. Don't worry about it. Same thing with astrology. Like a lot of people come through the course, life happens, like just get back to it when you can. All right, what else? I'm hoping to purchase the Nodes Masterclass. Yeah, you can do it through the Kickstarter. It's there. Pick it up. You'll love it. It's one of my favorites, for real. I only say that not because I think it's so great. It's just, I really like that class. Picasso said, anything you can imagine is real. Is that okay? I knew I'd heard that somewhere. That's beautiful. I love that. What was it like starting this YouTube channel? My wife is tired of hearing me ramble about this stuff, and I've been thinking of rambling at the internet instead. Well, you go do it. You start your, do your thing. Yeah, I started the YouTube channel after already having a significant following on a written blog. And the YouTube channel, I don't know, it grew really quickly. And I think that's because, like I said, I already had a good following on a written blog. So when I told everyone I was transferring over there, I think a lot of people were relieved because they like, audio and YouTube content, and podcasting is like, for some people, it's easier than reading, And so I think, I had some good luck that way. Let's see here. Take a few more questions, and I'll be done for the day. We're at about an hour and a half right now. I will get another dog, but my God, it hurts when they leave you. Like my heart is ripped out. I get so attached, but animals are my life and soul, my whole family. Yeah. There's that impermanence, right? It's why the gods in all of the stories want to be human, and the humans want to be gods. When we lose an animal, we think, I only want things that will last forever. I can't do this again. We want to be the gods. And the gods look at us and they say, I'd like to choose immortal life because things look a lot sweeter than I'm capable of tasting with death present in the experience. See, death is present in all of our experiences here. It's imbued within everything. Hillman wrote about this at length. There was a great book he wrote called Dream in the Underworld. Pan in the Nightmare is another good one, where it's like, the tension of the opposites is no more basic for us human beings than life and death being present with each other. We are dying. Everything sacred about life is held very close to us through the subtle reminder that we could and can die at any point in time. We do our best to insulate ourselves from that reality, but instinctually you can't avoid it. It's there. And so one of the reasons we reach to astrology is because we reach for that which transcends the bitterness of death. It's a great thing to be able to connect to the gods because they live forever. And so we can taste eternity in our experiences. That part of us that is eternal is reminded of our eternality through astrology. It's like, oh, it's so sweet. Thank you. We're drinking from the water bearer's pitcher in astrology, But then on the other hand, the gods want to be mortal. They want to taste our lives, which is why they live in and through us as archetypes. They constitute our experiences. They possess us if we're not careful, in fact. And so I see that really present in the exchange with animals. You know, the human and the animal is like God and the gods and the humans and the gods. The animal reminds us that our human, natural, mortal life is so beautiful and so sacred. And their death reminds us of that too. And then there's some way in which, you know, an animal, like especially dogs or pack animals, they look to us for some sense of leadership and cohesion, and they have maybe a role that they play in the pack. And I think that we have the experience sometimes, and I don't mean this too literally or in a weird power differential way, but my dog looks at me sometimes and I feel like a god. Do you know what I mean? And it's really special. I feel so special in the eyes of my dog. And then there's something about animals and humans that mirror that weird tension between the gods and the humans that the ancients all wrote about and talked about. Anyway, I could, go on. This is so fun. I love this. I love this. Can you detect illness or disease through a person's transit? Yeah, of course. And often when it will pass too, which is really helpful. Though, sometimes you can see health transit, but you don't really know what it will be. You just know that it might be a health transit. Adam, you missed a $10 super chat from Stephanie. Oh, I'm sorry. I did not. Here we go. Thank you for the super chat. By the way, just as a reminder for everyone, and I don't at all mean to be insulting Stephanie, but we really need people to donate through the Kickstarter, not through super chats, because the Kickstarter is where we actually reach our funding goal, and these don't really help us. But I thank you, though, because I don't mean to sound like a jerk. I'm just really trying to communicate that to people because people keep sending us super chat, and it's like, unless it's over on the Kickstarter, we're not getting toward our goal. So, but anyway, your question is my Pluto in Aquarius sphere reasonable? Because with 6 planets in Aquarius, risky facial tumor surgery on deck. Oh, wow. Well, is your fear reasonable? Yeah, sure. I mean, that sounds like a pretty rational fear to me. You know what I mean? Like, of course, you got a serious surgery coming up. But do you need to be afraid of Pluto? I don't think so. Think about Pluto as doing nothing more right now than just telling you that you're going to have transformative, healing, purgative surgery. You're eliminating something toxic that will allow you to have greater health and healing. Pluto loves doing that kind of stuff. So I don't think there's anything to be afraid of. Let the fear come to you if it's meant to. Like if Pluto is going to take your life, wait until it's very clear that that's what's happening before you get afraid of death. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? I know it sounds like weird to say, but it's like we get so scared of what Pluto is going to do, and we waste a lot of our life being afraid when it's like there's no actual reason to be afraid. Can you be afraid of a surgery? Sure, of course. But wait until it's done and how your recovery is going, and before you get afraid of Pluto. Do you know what I mean? Like, let your experience unfold, and it's okay to be afraid of death. It's okay to be afraid of something that we know we have to deal with or face that's right in front of us, like a surgery. What I recommend is not to get afraid of things you can't see or can't predict or can't be sure of with astrology, because there's just as many really positive things that we can't imagine that often come through these transits, especially with Pluto, whose name literally means riches, by the way, and has a way of really blessing our life with some very fertile and transformative power. So, trust the process. With as many people alive or have lived, haven't the gods experienced everything by now? I mean, no. And that's what's so really interesting, right? Is that, like, well, think about you, Joshua. Like, has there ever been a Joshua living exactly this life? No. That's what's so appealing about the material world, is that there's endless variegation, and there's endless difference, and there's endless new variations of experience that are always happening, because each soul is unique. Every soul is a completely unique flavor, and every lifetime is a completely unique experience for that soul. And there's there's a kind of endless love affair between eternity and materiality. They're the yin and yang of creation, right? So they don't, there's no, it's like Plato said, time is the moving image of eternity. So the time is like individualized, specific, different tastes of eternity. Like imagine going to a buffet where every single thing is the most immaculate, beautiful, and completely unique taste on that table. That's life. And so, of course, humans are just as interested in it as gods are. That's why we're here. And there's these interesting differences in the categories of being that we explore and experience with each other too. I just got a new puppy and I'm over the moon with oxytocin. I love that. Well, we're preparing for that soon, I hope. Oh my gosh. Well, I'm going to call it a halt here. We're at about an hour and a half, and I just thought, hey, it's moons in Sagittarius. Let's come on and, we'll throw out some fiery takes, get some good philosophical questions, give you my real thoughts on things. Thank you guys for being here. Thank you for making this channel a successful and supportive, beautiful place to hang out for people, and the school too. If you want to come study with us, take one of our master classes, pick up a class pass through the Kickstarter. They are on sale just for a couple more days. And then we'll be moving into the new year. Here is the link to donate in the comments section. You can find it in the comments of this post, in the description of the video, on the website, nightlightastrology.com. Okay, last count. What are we at? We need 1,937 backers. We are at 1,129, which means we need 808 more backers to go before New Year's Eve. A $5 donation matters as much as a 10 when part of our goal is to get to a certain number of backers. Of course, we're hoping, to still have a big push financially, get a bunch of people buying class passes and stuff like that. But everything matters. If you like this channel, if it's a positive part of your life, continue supporting us. We really appreciate it. From myself, my family. This is how I support my kids and my family. This is a big part of my livelihood. I show up here every day, make sure it's free and accessible, and then just ask people, hey, pay your astrologer if you value it. That's all. And then I will do amazing things, I promise, to keep getting better at what I do, to make sure that all of our classes are affordable, to support my staff, to build the success of other astrologers, and to be, real and an honest resource for you as you learn and study astrology and develop your own thoughts and ideas. And we'll be friends. That's a promise that I like to make, is that, like, look, you come here, the vibe that I want to make sure you get from Nightlight is friendship. You might have, my takes may be hot takes, and you may have other takes, but you know what? I'd still want to be friends. I have lots of friends in my life where we have different ideas about things, different astrological friends. We have different ideas about things. But what matters more to me than being right is being friends with people, and being supportive, and, trying to build the success of the field of astrology going forward, making sure that it's a reputable thing, that people know that this is a solid spiritual tradition, and that we also build the success of other astrologers. So anyway, have a great rest of your day. I'll be live tomorrow to do some birth chart readings. I'll be live on Monday and on Tuesday morning at 11 a.m. Central, the next 3 days in a row, doing some live birth chart readings, just to say thank you and try to push us across the finish line. Thank you very much to everyone for being here. I hope you have a great rest of your day.